the April meeting of the City and County of Honolulu Climate Change Commission. Commissioners Victoria Keener and McKenna Kaufman have been excused. They're on travel. So we'll take a roll call. Melanie Islam.
Present.
And Rosie Allegado.
Present.
So we do have quorum. We have a packed agenda. Next, I'd like to move to the minutes for January and March. So starting with January minutes, I had no modifications. Commissioner Islam, did you have any modifications?
No modifications. Look good.
No. And Allegado?
None.
None. Okay. Any objections or abstentions to adopting these? All right, so the January 21 minutes are adopted. Moving on to March 4th, I had one change. Page 4, item 8.1 or 8.2. Down at the bottom of the page, it says Commissioner Islam, and I think you need the word asked, A-S-K-E-D after that. Commissioner Islam asked if YCC, Hawaii Youth Climate Commission Coalition. Commissioner Islam, any changes?
No changes.
And Commissioner Allegado?
None.
All right. Any objections or abstentions to adopting these? All right, the minutes are adopted for March 4th. And moving on to item number 4, communications and correspondence from the public. I was told there were none. Is that still the case?
Yes.
Yes, great, okay. And we're up to item 5, Director Gonzer, report on activities.
Great, aloha and good morning, commissioners and participants. Glad to be with you. Happy Earth Month. Very timely commission agenda items on both international and the national reports around climate change, and also keying in on increasing temperatures and heat. Just in case you're curious, there are more federal transportation dollars really keying in on the reality of things like impervious surfaces and the consequences for heat, and potential funding for things like reflective surfaces, other cooling practices, including tree inventories and work. And then, we're 2 weeks away from Earth Day, and we're gearing up per usual to release the annual sustainability report on Earth Day as well. So we're finalizing some of the last graphics on the data and the production of that report. And then quickly just wanted to bid a mahalo and a hui hou to Anna Mines, another one of our stellar AmeriCorps Vistas, whose last day was Wednesday. She was serving in the role of Community Resilience and Equity Specialist. But we had a full week of interviews getting ready for a May onboarding of 5 Vista positions across 3 of the offices, including our office, Office of Economic Revitalization, and the Office of Housing. And after this onboarding, we'll have one more big cohort in August as we start to wind down and wrap up our AmeriCorps contract. Just for your awareness, Chair and Commissioners, you may recall that you produced a report for periodic review. All city boards and commissions go through really a 5-year cycle. This report was adopted by the Transportation Sustainability and Health Committee on March 21st, and it is on the agenda for anticipated adoption next week, Wednesday, at the full City Council hearing. The committee concurred with your conclusions of of no recommended changes to the structuring of the Climate Change Commission at this time. We've been glad to get back and doing some community engagements. I think I shared some of this last meeting as well, but we do have an upcoming meeting or a community partnership tomorrow. And this is really all in line with the Climate Ready Oahu project. I'm working on an adaptation strategy. We evaluated who we were connecting with and really who we weren't connecting with around the island, both geographically and demographically. And in an exciting, unique partnership with Malama Learning Center, they're serving as really a node or a hub in connecting us with other West Side and North Shore place-based organizations to help us connect with those groups and the residents that they engage with. So tomorrow we'll be up in the Pupukea area with, again, both Malama Learning Center and Malama Pupukea Waimea, both to do an engagement activity, share more about the project, and then join in a HANA activity. And we've already been out to Ma'o Farms working with their youth leaders for a couple of weekends already. We have upcoming engagements with Ka'ala Farms and also Malama Local Ea up on the North Shore as well. Several staff members participated in the annual point in time count. So this is a nationwide program. It is an obligation as we, one, want to make sure that we're aware of our houseless population and really targeting resources to support that growing challenge. But also this aids in our communications with agencies like HUD and other human services to really take a census of these individuals so that we can think about ways to deploy resources and to support them moving forward. For those that haven't participated in an annual point in time count, I would recommend it. It's not an easy activity, but the service organizations are tremendous partners and trainers. And really it's about connecting with people, our family members, our neighbors, all across the island and really across the state. It's a statewide activity. And it really is a meaningful activity. So keep that on your radar in case you see things in the news next year looking for volunteers. And then lastly, on the engagement side, a lot of the staff had a great opportunity on the windward side to connect with Huio Kolau Poko in some Kawainui wetland restoration. Again, just continuing our awareness and making the linkages across climate change adaptation, ecological restoration, and how that can support us moving forward. And then two final updates, one on federal funding, and then just to share some updates on several of the resilience actions. To start with, there's been a lot of attention around federal appropriations and certainly even some critique, particularly in the hazard mitigation space, where apparently some of the congressional directed spending across sort of the return of earmarks, funding some projects within FEMA's money pool, things that previously weren't very competitive. So there's a lot of scrutiny and pros and cons to the return of federal earmarks. But we're at least pleased in working with our congressional delegation that the city was quite successful working with both Senator Schatz and Congressman Case last year. All of the CODEL offices were receiving additional requests just last month and this month to think about the next federal fiscal year. But we're pleased to share general progress at the city and a couple of specific ones around climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. So beyond other awards to the fire department and some of our crisis outreach, response and engagement and affordable housing initiatives, DTS was successful in getting $10 million to help electrify the bus, continue to electrify the bus network, and looking at charging infrastructure across one of the longest corridors that we have. Route 40 is a Makaha Tower to Ala Moana Center bus route, a really critical and well-traveled route for many bus numbers. And this will really help ensure that I think Chair, you actually had a question about that, thinking about, where is the charging infrastructure distributed across the network and the system. So that's a very exciting one. additional monies to support more public-facing and city electric chargers as we work on transitioning our fleet. And then one that's really near and dear to my heart that we worked with Department of Parks and Recreation on is to get funding to really develop a complete and holistic city, street, and park tree inventory. This kind of information is essential and definitely related to the white paper that you're all working on right now, so that we can be strategic about where the gaps are, what are the conditions of some of these resources, and start to treat this as a really critical city asset and infrastructure system. So it's both an inventory and thinking about asset management moving forward. So I'm super stoked on that one, and pleased that we could partner with both the state and the federal government on that. And then to wrap up some Resilience Action progress, Resilience Action 21 was around this concept of building benchmarking. So a better buildings benchmarking program. The city already benchmarks our own facilities, 10,000 square feet and above. There's now a bill going through the process at City Council, Bill 22 for the year 2022. It's both a resilience action strategy and a climate action plan action. It passed first reading on March the 16th. It's anticipated to be on the Transportation Sustainability and Health Committee meeting on the 19th of this month. And if you're interested in learning more about that bill and the ins and outs of what benchmarking is, you can visit resilientoahu.org/bills. And then Resilience Action 34 is really around hazard mitigation within the Alawai Canal watershed. This sort of large watershed inclusive of Makiki, Manoa, Palolo valleys, and then all the communities out towards Waikiki. We now are in meeting 2 of 4 weekly geographic sessions, looking at both the inputs that community has provided, how it's being evaluated and considered towards this reevaluation study. And if you're interested in participating in today's meeting, it's at noon, but there's 2 more next week, Thursday at noon, recognizing the state holiday on Friday, and then on Earth Day, the final of this session, this segment of community engagement, also at noon. And you can learn more at honolulu.gov/alawai. And then lastly, Resilience Action 15 is focused on community resilience hub planning. And this is a concept that's been growing in popularity and success nationwide, but also locally on Hawaii Island. And just want to share that there will be a forthcoming island-wide survey so that we can learn a little bit more about community assets, community leadership, and see how and where and why city could potentially be a better partner on some of this community leadership that has really grown out of necessity over the past couple of years, with key leaders like Key Project on the windward side and Waianae Coast Comprehensive Clinic on the west side, and a lot of other leaders in between. We'll be releasing that survey in an upcoming newsletter, and we appreciate everyone's sharing that around. So that's updates for this month. Chair, happy to take any questions.
That's wonderful. You guys are so active, and just a consistent theme from your office is getting out in the community. We just hear it month after month. Kudos for that. Commissioner Islam, any questions?
No, you guys have been busy and busy in a really good way. I love kind of echoing what Chair Fletcher said, all the engagement with the community. So all I can say is keep up the good work, and I applaud you for introducing Bill 22, and I look forward to following it at the next hearing.
Commissioner Allegado?
Yeah, I also want to commend you on being able to get back into the community and have connections and establish those hubs, particularly with Malama Learning Center. And as we move forward, as you know, one of our major priorities is to also bring into our commission meetings and hear from our communities. So I think that's a great overlap, where if you are having these meetings out in the community, that can raise awareness of who we are. And so that lays the foundation for us being able to invite some of those stakeholder organizations and individuals to come and present. at our meetings.
Yeah, that sounds great. We'd be happy to make any introductions or introductions as appropriate.
Any questions? or
You know all of them anyway, Vice Chair.
Any questions or comments from the public? You can just turn your videos on or raise your hand icon. Okay, seeing nothing, we'll move on to agenda item 6A, a short report on the IPCC report. May I have share screen capacity? Looks like I have it. There we are. All right. So I've got my browser open here. This is one of many Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, access points. And I've chosen this one because you have available here the 3 reports that have now been released for assessment report 6. This is the 6th episode over 20 some years where an assessment of the published literature on climate change and a new round of modeling is released in the form of reports. AR6 had 3 reports. The first one was released back in August of 2021. It's the physical science basis for climate change. There is so much information in these IPCC reports. I'm just going to skate very quickly across the surface and mention a few sort of main points. The first report, which is Working Group 1, that came out back in August of 2021, stated that it's unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land. And that was sort of the big headline that went around the world. It stated that the scale of recent changes across the climate system as a whole and the present state of many aspects of the climate system are unprecedented over many centuries to many thousands of years. It concluded that human-induced climate change is already affecting many weather and climate extremes in every region of the globe. And another conclusion was that many changes in the climate system have become larger in direct relation to increasing global warming. They include increases in the frequency and intensity of hot extremes, marine heat waves, heavy precipitation, agricultural and ecological drought in some regions, and proportion of intense tropical cyclones in some regions, as well as reductions in Arctic sea ice, snow cover, and permafrost. The second report came out in February of this year, and it dealt largely with adaptation and vulnerability. It concluded that human-induced climate change, including more frequent and intense extreme events, has caused widespread adverse impacts and related losses and damages to nature and people beyond natural climate variability. The vulnerability of ecosystems and people to climate change differs substantially among and within regions, driven by patterns of intersecting social economic development. Global warming reaching 1.5 C in the near term would cause unavoidable increases in multiple climate hazards and present multiple risks to ecosystems and humans. And beyond 2040, and depending on the level of warming, climate change will lead to numerous risks to natural and human systems. They identified 127 key risks and assessed midterm and long-term impacts from them, not just globally, but regionally. Climate change impacts and risks are becoming increasingly complex and more difficult to manage. And if global warming transiently exceeds 1.5 C in the coming decades or later, then many human and natural systems will face additional severe risks compared to remaining below 1.5 C. And the third report, which came out, I think a week ago now, maybe it was as recently as Monday, dealt with mitigation of climate change. It concluded that the total net anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions have continued to rise over the past decade, and that emissions during the past decade were higher than in any previous decade, but the rate of growth in the past decade was lower than in the previous decade. So the rate of growth of emissions between 2010 and 2019 was lower than the rate of growth in the first decade of this century. Total greenhouse gas emissions in 2030 associated with the implementation of nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. And these are pledges or promises that nations make under the Paris Agreement, which was achieved in 2015, would make it likely that warming will exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius during the 21st century. Policies in these nationally determined contributions implemented by the end of 2020 are projected to result in higher global greenhouse gas emissions than those implied. So policies and pledges are two different things, and I'm going to get into that in a second. This implies that mitigation after 2030 can no longer establish a pathway with less than 2/3 probability to exceed 1.5. And they also go on to conclude that greenhouse gas emissions need to peak no later than 3 years from now, 2025. So if you will indulge me, I have a couple of PowerPoints. I'm going to move through these very quickly, but this will take less than 10 minutes. So we have the 2015 Paris Agreement under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change to stop global warming before it reaches 2 degrees Celsius and to pursue efforts to end warming before it reaches 1.5. What is the progress on 1.5? If you look at the bottom axis, we go from 2010 to 2050, and the vertical axis is carbon dioxide emissions in gigatons, which is billions of tons. This black line is the last decade of emissions. And we had, because of the COVID-19 recession in 2020, emissions globally fell 5.4%, but with stimulus of the nations, of the world's nations, to come out of that recession, we saw a resurgence of emissions last year, almost regaining where we were in 2019. So emissions rose again 4.9% last year. Now we have to reduce emissions to stop warming, and this is the pathway to reaching net zero by 2050. Net zero by 2050 is considered the goal line for limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. But based on the most recent pledges or promises by the nations, which were updated at the end of the last climate change meeting in Glasgow in November of last year, we're on a pathway based on these promises of 2.5 to 2.8 degrees Celsius. But as I said, there's a difference between what the nations promise and what the world's nations are actually investing in and permitting in terms of fossil fuel infrastructure. And looking at the actual policies of the world's nations, we're on a pathway of 3 to 3.5 degrees Celsius. This represents a gap, and every year the UN comes out with what's known as the GAP report analyzing this. And there was an addendum to the GAP report that was issued during the Glasgow meeting. However, also during the Glasgow meeting, the Washington Post released an in-depth analysis that concluded on average emissions around the world are underreported by 23%. And we learned about a month ago from the International Energy Agency that methane emissions alone from the energy sector are underreported by 70%. Methane is responsible for around 30% of global warming, It dissipates faster than carbon dioxide, but it's much more powerful. And achieving significant cuts in methane emissions would have a rapid effect on limiting global warming. Now, on average, over the past decade, 86% of carbon dioxide emissions came from burning fossil fuels, 14% from various types of land use patterns involving deforestation and also open soil agriculture. These emissions, 46% on average, went into the atmosphere, trapping heat. About 31% was taken up by photosynthesis by the terrestrial biome, and about 23% is dissolved in the ocean, causing ocean acidification. But the terrestrial biome is beginning to become unstable. This paper reports and reminds us photosynthesis removes CO2 from the air, but another part of plant metabolism is respiration, which releases CO2 and water to the air. Photosynthesis has a heat limit or thermal maximum past which it sharply declines, but respiration continues to increase. Carbon uptake by land plants is degraded as you approach and pass this thermal maximum. And with continued emissions, modeling is projecting that carbon uptake by the terrestrial biome may be degraded by half as early as 2040. This effect is not accounted for by the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, nor are the underreporting of methane or greenhouse gas emissions writ large. And we only need to look at the Amazon, which because of logging, mining, hunting, deforestation, damming, drought, tree mortality, has lost 1/3 of all biomass over the last decade. And over that decade, the Brazilian portion of the Amazon basin released 18 billion tons of CO2, but sequestered only 15 billion tons. So it's now likely that the Amazon is a net source of greenhouse gas emissions. And a paper was released last week, which looked at all of the world's tropical forests. And during the first 5 years of this century, there was a net release of about 1 billion tons of CO2 per year from the tropical rainforest belt. But in the last 5 years, between 2015 and 2019, the release of carbon doubled. So the conclusion is, one of the things they noticed or observed is that 82% of forest carbon loss results from agriculture. And they conclude that existing strategies to reduce forest loss are not successful. So what is our current pathway? SSP 4-6.0 is projected as the current pathway for greenhouse gas emissions. And when you look at this projection, we see that we are in this zone of greater than 3 degrees Celsius. And various papers, I'll wrap it up here. Various papers report that on beyond 3 degrees Celsius, we risk turning 1/5 of the land surface into unlivable conditions, potentially displacing up to 1/3 of humanity. All right, I tried to keep that quick. And I know it was pretty direct. So we'll go back to formality here. Any questions, Commissioner Islam?
Chip, thank you for sharing this. It's excellent. I think pointing out these resources is a good reference for everyone in the community. I've read these, like the front half of many of these reports, and I haven't read yet the one that came out on Monday, which is about mitigation. But the big message I'm getting from a lot of this is that we need to act now, and the time horizons that we projected just are not going to work for us if we truly want to save this planet, right? In short. And I've been thinking about how do we make that happen? And I think a lot of it is a synergy. It looks at policy and action and a synergy between private, government, and community to immediately solve, I think probably from a regional community base approach, but then looking overarching at like a whole system, and our system would be Oahu. And so I guess my question is, how do we enact greater change, right? And what role can we as the commissioners or as the commission do to facilitate that? So that's my question. It's probably a part of a larger discussion, but I really appreciate you sharing this info with the organization and with everyone on the call.
Thank you. You raise a really important point. I mean, what can any one of us do? What is our agency, given the global scale of this? I mean, I've been wrestling with this for decades, right? What can one person do that is not in huge position of authority, right? And even those that are, like the Director General of the UN, really, he's been put into a position of huge authority, yet he keeps releasing more and more dire quotes as these reports come out year after year, sort of expressing his outrage, and yet I really admire him. Antonio Guterres, he is incredibly dedicated, but even in a position like that, he's not having the effect that he hopes to, and that we hope he would. Rosie, any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I echo very similarly what Commissioner Islam said, which is, well, and you brought it up too, which is, it seems that what are we to do in the face of such global kind of problems? And you and I have had conversations about how I think in Hawaii, we tend to think about what is it that we can do here, for ourselves. We look very much inward, and we think about, well, we have to save ourselves. And I think that I think I'm drawing lines back to the Youth Commission meeting that we had. And that's what I would say is where we lean into is the resiliency that has been built into our ancestral ecosystems for Hawaii. I think it would be hard for us to try and speak beyond Hawaii, but we can certainly speak for Hawaii and for Oahu, and maybe perhaps through that action model what other spaces and places can do. But I agree that I think it has to be not individual, maybe not global, but somewhere in between. And that in between is our community, which is, our island of Oahu, which is the purpose of this commission. So I also wanted to say your presentation is beautiful and, well, though depressing, but very well put together. So thank you on that.
Thanks, Rosie. My presentations to the public are extremely depressing. And so I've really struggled, how to end on an up note. And I have a couple that I sort of keep in my back pocket, one of which is, we're actually lucky to be here right now, to have this responsibility, to realize how strong the science is, to have so much amazing information. Now is the time when real transformation needs to take place, and it can take place. We can have a cleaner, healthier, more beautiful community in the future, and I mean globally. Our ecosystems can be rescued. We aren't not yet over the edge of the cliff, but boy, we are headed there with pretty great acceleration, unfortunately. I also believe, or have come to believe, that Hawaii, it's a real benefit to be isolated. It is a real benefit to be an isolated group of islands, provided that we can get over the logistical challenges of isolation that are going to happen. But the displacement of humanity that has already begun is leading to conflict situations around the world's political borders. And this is only going to increase. We have a community that doesn't need to worry about conflict at our borders. We need to worry about, are we going to be resilient in the face of climate change? And in fact, the second report of AR6 coins a new phrase, it's familiar wording, called climate resilient development. And they make the point that mitigation and adaptation are not two separate things. We have come so far down the climate change line that we need to combine these. And, for every building that we build, as an example, it needs to be adapted to storm surge, extreme heat, sea level rise, but it must also be zero emissions. You know, it's got to do both things. It's got to be an entity of mitigation and an entity of adaptation. So this is referred to as climate resilient adaptation. And lastly, I more recently have come to realize that the number one thing we need to do to be a resilient community here in Hawaii is to bring back together the lowest economic strata and the highest economic strata. You know, globally, the top 10% and lowest 10% in terms of economic income globally are 25% wider because of climate change. And the more that you can stitch a community back together, the more that a community can learn to support each other and be a cohesive community, the more resilient it will be to the shocks and stresses of climate change. And we are so lucky to have a 1,000-year-long culture of aloha. We have a culture that we can, if we turn to that sincerely and fully, the indigenous culture of these islands gives us the tools we need to bring our community back together into a coherent community, because it's a community that works together that could withstand, for instance, a direct hurricane strike or these heat waves or the sort of slower stressors that evolve. All right, off my soapbox, but happy to take any other comments from Melanie or Rosie. Matt, of course. All right, open to the public. Would love your input. Nancy.
Hi, aloha. I'd just like to thank Professor Fletcher for presenting to the Hawaiian Homes Commission. It was pretty mind-blowing, and but I think it was a real true moment of truth and reckoning for our community, for our beneficiaries and our commissioners. And so I just want to say, keep up the good work. It may be hard, but it's very worthwhile. So mahalo.
Thank you, Nancy. Henry.
It's interesting that we are planting trees as an offset to climate change, where trees are going to become less and less valuable as we move forward, unless we radically change the way we treat trees.
Trees are not a solution to this problem. They would have been great 40 years ago, but new forests are actually sources of greenhouse gas emissions. You need to get into the specifics, but yeah, planting trees is not the way out of this. There are lots of co-benefits from planting trees. It's extremely important. And absolutely, we need to plant trees to create shade around the urban areas and in fact everywhere. But looking at trees as a significant form of sequestration of pulling CO2 out of the air, that's not the most powerful reason to plant trees. My thoughts on that matter. Thanks, Henry. There are lots of other good reasons why we should be planting trees, and that gets into heat, which we will be doing shortly.
Thank you.
Other thoughts from anyone? Alrighty. And just a brief bit on the new NOAA report on sea level rise. So let me just back up for a second. We're going to have a discussion of a draft heat paper today. I'm not going to call for any action on that paper. I actually sent the draft out to Vivek Shandis at Portland State University. He presented to us last year on the issue of urban heat. I sent it off to him, hoping that he would find some time to comment on it. I also received edits from Commissioner McKenna Kaufman and Victoria Keener, and they would like a little more time with the paper. So we're not going to take action on the paper, but we will we will have some time for Rosie and Melanie to provide comments on the paper. I would like to write a sea level rise, an update to the sea level rise guidance, and present that at the next meeting. So the next meeting, I hope we will have action on the heat paper, and then maybe an initial discussion on the sea level rise paper, which I will introduce. And then the following meeting in June, perhaps action on the sea level rise paper. And related to sea level rise, I'm going to share screen again here. And if you Google NASA, all you have to do, at least on my search engine, NASA Sea, you get the NASA Sea Level Change portal. And this portal provides access to online tools. So what were the model projections of sea level rise that came out in Working Group 1 last August from IPCC AR6? There is a wonderful rabbit hole. You can dive down here, and I'll be incorporating a summary of this in the guidance paper that I produce. But today I thought I would dive down this rabbit hole, which is interagency sea level rise scenario tool. And this is an update of a 2017 report that came out of NOAA, authored by Billy Sweet and lots of co-authors, that provided us with scenarios for planning on sea level rise. And so we can, let's see here. So these scenarios, there are 5 sea level rise scenarios. Is this too small for anybody to see? Everybody can see this? Okay, thanks, Melanie. There are 5 sea level scenarios that are in this new updated report. They are defined by how high sea level in the scenarios rises by the end of this century. So there's a low scenario in which we only get about 1 foot or 30 centimeters of sea level rise by 2100, an intermediate low in which we get 0.5 meter, an intermediate of 1 meter, intermediate high of 1.5, and a high of 2 meters. So these are not projections of sea level rise based on climate modeling. These are fixed scenarios for planners to use based on assessments of risk tolerance. Can your project, a road, a building, a nuclear power plant, can your project tolerate a lot of risk from sea level rise? If yes, then you would use a lower scenario. If the answer is no, it can't tolerate much, it can't tolerate any potential for flooding from sea level rise, then you would pick a higher scenario. All right, so what does that mean? Let's launch the tool. And first, we're going to look at the global projection. And these are the 5 scenarios, low to high. And let's look at what they reach by the year 2100. So as I already said, the low scenario reaches about 30 centimeters, above that 50 centimeters, and then 1 meter. So these are those fixed values that determine the slope of these curves. And what are the intermediate, or what are the interim sea level positions under each of these? Let's pick the intermediate scenario here. And by 2040, for instance, it projects 20 centimeters. By 2050, it projects about 1 foot, or 28 centimeters. And of course, by 2100, it projects 1 meter. All right, now let's return to the map. So those are the global projections, just a quick visit to those. And let's look at regional projections. In fact, Let's click here on Hawaii, where we have well, now we're up to 6 tide gauges. There are 2 here on Oahu. Now they separate the 2. One is over in Kaneohe Bay, the other is at Honolulu Harbor. Let's click on Honolulu Harbor. And under the intermediate scenario specific to that tide gauge, now the end of century projection goes up to 1.16 meters. So what's taking place here? There is modeling that goes into these scenarios to make them localized. And the modeling looks at a number of factors. One is, as ice melts around the planet, the gravity field of that ice decays away, and the attraction of the ocean surface towards that ice is reduced. So, for instance, the ocean surface slopes up towards Antarctica and towards Greenland, and even the Alaskan glacier complex, and even the Himalayas. And the decrease in gravity for all these ice complexes has been calculated in terms of its effect on reducing that slope. So ironically, as this ice melts and contributes to sea level rise, in the immediate vicinity of the world's oceans, sea level actually goes down somewhat. Now, given an average sea level rise, if it's going down in those areas where the gravity is reduced, it's going up more than average someplace else, and that's called the far field. We live in the far field. So we see more than the average global sea level rise, while other places of the planet see less than the global average of sea level rise. There is also the effect of vertical land motion. Large parts of the continents that were previously glaciated are actually uplifting, and to the periphery of those areas that weren't glaciated but were nearby, those lands are actually going down. So there's vertical land motion taking place all over the planet, and that is incorporated into this. And all of this is known as sea level fingerprinting. So let's look at our full projection for the Honolulu tide gauge. And here it is. You see the label of Honolulu here. And now let's look at our 5 scenarios. And we see that the intermediate scenario is 1.16 meters by the end of the century. This is approaching 4 feet. So the now canonical 3.2 foot sea level rise exposure area, that's not going to be reached at the end of the century. It's going to be reached some period sooner than the end of the century. And we can scroll down here to the scheduling, if you would. Under the intermediate scenario, we're looking at about 1 foot of sea level rise by mid-century. And if you are a planner, I will remind you that we have a thing called king tides. And so I would add 10 inches or 12 inches to this 1 foot. And as a minimum, so that your project doesn't get wet during the highest tides of the year, you should be adapting to at least 2 feet of sea level rise. That's an absolute minimum in my mind. And I'll be recommending that in our guidance. And here we are up to 2100. And our 3.2 feet will be, that is 98 centimeters, I think. That's going to be about a decade earlier than we had previously projected with our modeling from several years ago. Now, of interest is, where does our sea level rise come from? And the modeling actually breaks down the sources of our sea level rise. Some of our rise, in fact, the majority of it comes from thermal expansion, stereodynamic sea level. So all this blue down here, under the intermediate scenario, it's on the order of 40 centimeters. Or let's see, or we're up to, okay, so these are scale. We know that the intermediate reaches 1 meter by the end of the century. So we can actually look at this decade by decade. But here, so we're looking at about 1 foot of our local sea level rise coming from thermal expansion under the intermediate scenario. Then we have a little less than that coming from the world's mountain glaciers or alpine glaciers. About 18 centimeters coming from the melting of Greenland, about a foot, a little more than a foot coming from the melting on Antarctica. And then land water storage. Now, the fact that we pull water out of our aquifers largely for the purpose of irrigation and producing food, and then discharge it, or it goes into the local watershed and eventually into the ocean. A little less than 10% of global sea level rise is caused by us pulling water out of continental aquifers and discharging it into the ocean. So we are a component of sea level rise. Throughout the 20th century, as we were busy damming the world's rivers and trapping water in new reservoirs, we were actually mitigating sea level rise. But now we've dammed up all the big rivers, and now the water that we pull out of the ground does go into the ocean. It doesn't, there's no permanent residence in the reservoirs. So this is interesting information from a scientific point of view, but it's important to know this because these are the gravity components that go into the fingerprinting specifically for Honolulu. All right, why don't I pause here and let's see. How do I get out of stop share? There we go, stop sharing. See if there are any questions from anybody. That's what I wanted to present on this new tool. Melanie, any thoughts or questions?
Great tool. Thank you for sharing this.
Yeah.
Most immediately comes to my mind, because I hear it from my community of architects, is what do we design to? And so I would be very interested to see how the next version, the update to our SLR paper, talks about this policy integration and then impacts to our code, so that the buildings that we actually do design do have some level of response, right? So thank you. This is an excellent tool.
Great. Yeah, let's make sure we put a lot of granularity into this next guidance, because now we have it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. By the way, so I was spending a lot of time talking about the intermediate scenario. Miami-Dade County has chosen the intermediate high scenario for their modeling. So this is something that we're also going to need to discuss. Which of these scenarios do we want to recommend?
Okay.
Rosie.
No, I had the same thoughts as Melanie, as I'm really looking forward to how this is going to kind of be integrated into the new updated SLR guidance. And I was actually even thinking, perhaps since Melanie has a special appreciation of the policies, it's something that you two could work on together. But I don't want to volunteer people. But I mean, I definitely see that Melanie's expertise in this matter, or at least her knowledge of what is concerning, would be something that could be something to build in.
I would love that. I love that idea.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share some thoughts. I do agree. I think we should have a conversation about policy, probably bringing in some other people, but that is, I think, is really where the change needs to happen, because we have all the knowledge, we have all the principles, we've been talking about it for decades. Now we need to act.
Yeah.
So yeah, happy.
Rosie, is voluntel, is that a real word? Should I use that?
Voluntold. I mean, it happens.
Voluntold.
Yeah, when you get voluntold,
Yes.
happens in my house.
Yeah. I took bystander training, and then my daughter told me there's a word called upstanding, if you're upstanding for someone. So that's a new one I didn't learn either, or I've recently learned. Matt, any thoughts about the sea level discussion?
Yeah, certainly hugely important, right? Where we depend upon and greatly appreciate the Commission's capacity to stay on top of a lot of this. We're generally end users of both guidance, tools, et cetera. I see some other city colleagues on the meeting today. This relates to ongoing discussions about updating our shoreline management rules and regulations. How do we as a city integrate this data into some of our own physical projects, right? Our own capital improvement projects to sort of help lead and show and demonstrate how to use this information. questions maybe back to you, Chair. It's still the tools that we have available, like the state sea level rise viewer, are still the tools, and they help us geographically and spatially. It certainly just helps us now better understand the timing of some of these considerations. And it's really helpful to remind ourselves too that the tool, yes, it had some time component to it, but that wasn't really the main point, because the actual water levels are really what we need to be thinking about, and then just adjusting the when on that sort of equation in terms of how we integrate the work. But you know, we greatly appreciate this. The Department of Planning and Permitting shared at the State Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission meeting sort of a proposal to look at a managed retreat plan, and not just get hung up on 3.2, but also even thinking about the data we have up to 6 feet, right? As you're sharing other municipalities being a little bit more conservative about the levels and the when, there definitely is a need to think beyond where it's appropriate, where we can manage, and where it's comprehensible to some extent. So really appreciate any additional updates, guidance, and look forward to seeing how we can then integrate it into the work.
Yeah, you made a great point. 3.2 feet, although it was originally presented as end of the century, it's still a valid 3.2 feet regardless of where it happens. And this new information tells us it's going to happen a little bit sooner. And also with regard to modeling, we have a new project here, which is going to be doing new modeling, two-dimensional wave modeling. The previous wave modeling was one-dimensional. We're going to be building new digital elevation models. We have a new erosion model that we are going to be using, which has been developed by one of my former students at the U.S. Geological Survey, which is a two-dimensional erosion model that takes into account a longshore transport as well as cross-shore transport of sand. So it's a more robust projection of land loss. And we're going to be building a new website, which presents our various types of sea level rise impacts at 1 foot increments along the lines of the NOAA sea level rise viewer. It'll be 6 months to a year before the first of these products start to come out, and they will be developed for every island in Hawaii over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, and constantly updating as well. So there are new sea level online tools on their way.
And then I guess a natural question on that: in only a couple of weeks, May 1st, will become effective a state law that obligates seller disclosure for properties in the state's sea level rise exposure area. I'm curious how the ongoing research fits into the state's commission and any updates to those public tools that are, you know, now becoming the basis for regulations.
Yeah, well, as science continues to improve, policymakers are going to have to figure out how do we update these policies. And I don't think that's a new thing. Updating policies is pretty standard practice. So as new tools come online, there'll need to be discussions about what they mean. What do they also mean in terms of the existing guidelines, and what sort of updates need to be made? Any thoughts or comments from the public here? I see a really nice cross-section of professionals in this area. Don't be shy. Thanks, Nancy.
I, do you think, I mean, it seems to me that, I mean, we used to update our policies and our, you know, SMA rules and that sort of thing, like every 10 to 15 years. It seems like that cycle is going to have to speed up a whole lot, because the scientific data is really coming more frequently. It's more thorough. So I think we're just going to have to be in kind of a continuous revision mode, sounds like.
Well, I mean, my first thought is, aren't we lucky? Right? I mean, I think this community here in Hawaii with regard to sea level rise, and hopefully with regard to other climate impacts, we will get there. we're really benefiting from a great relationship between the university, the consulting sector, and the government sector. I think everybody's moving together in the same direction. We don't find significant opposition to recognizing the reality of sea level rise and applying these tools. So the question is, how do we develop the policies? The biggest bottleneck, I think, so far has been policy development, because we still have people out there who are paid to stop policy from moving forward. Other thoughts from anybody? Alrighty. I feel like I'm doing all the talking today.
I see a comment from Morgan Stevenson, Chip.
Oh, look at that. There are 11 comments in here. I haven't been paying attention. Okay. Thank you. Yep. Thank you. Morgan Stevenson, the 2017 NOAA study included exceedance probabilities for their different scenarios. Are these updated in the 2022 numbers? I'm sure they are, and those were important. We'll make sure that we get those into the guidance paper. All right. Thanks for pointing that out, Rosie. All right, moving on to item number 7. Let's see. So, Commissioner Islam, do you have comments, editorial comments on the paper? This is always a kind of a little bit of a clumsy process here.
Okay.
But I can open up the paper on screen here and start to real time include your comments if you have any.
Chip, maybe can I suggest we go like maybe general comments and then granular?
Sure. How about if I share screen and open up the heat document and let's see, is this, nope, this is a newer version. Here we go. So I think this is the one that was made public, and I can just, is this? No, I don't think it is. Wait a minute. There it is. I can just make notes on this as we go. All right, so Melanie, I'll just sort of follow your lead.
Okay. I've had a chance to look at it kind of briefly, but would like to spend more time. But I kind of immediately jumped to the heat strategy section. I like how it's broken out by, passive solutions. It looks at sort of larger planning, and then start to look at sort of more mechanical systems. I think there could be some expansion to those strategies. And there is some existing resource out there in the building community, and I think also locally that has been developed. It was developed a few years ago, but the content to that data is still relevant. So it would be starting on page 12.
Yep.
Heat strategies. So I think a good portion of the paper, talks about reflectivity on all surfaces, right? Having like colors, what have you. I think there should be a discussion on ventilation also as a strategy and shading within the building form, because that will help not just with, that will help with the overall sort of theme and idea of really reducing internal heat within a space. A good resource to look at is Berkeley Lawrence. They have a heat island lab and focus group. So they have been doing kind of great study work on vertical, horizontal surfaces, and then on the planning scale.
Great, good.
Yeah, I mean, I have smaller points which I can kind of share over in an email. I'm just kind of curious how extensive in detail you would like to get on strategies, because I do see some overlap potentially with at least the published version right now of the white paper for the synergy between climate change and the construction industry. So,
Right.
so I guess it's really what do you want the focus of this to be, is really sort of setting the stage and the case for things.
Yeah. So the paper is organized with findings, first of all, and there's a newer version. I kept working on this. There's a newer version, which is basically a literature review, and then recommendations, specific recommendations. And one of the overarching philosophies here is to create something that not only provides some guidance, but also provides a sort of a literature review, a resource where someone who needs to come up to speed quickly without having to go out and do their own research. This could be a one-stop shop for your first stab at working towards understanding urban heat. And so I actually began very broad scale here, talking about what I presented in my PowerPoint a few minutes ago, that we are not on pace to stop warming at 1.5 or 2 degrees, sort of present that argument. What does heating mean at about 3 degrees globally? And so I present literature on that. And what are the impacts? Then we go into heat and human communities and disparities of impacts, especially in urban areas. There is a whole body of literature that describes how economically depressed areas have been subjected to lack of shade, lack of tree, lack of open land, and are the regions in a city that experience early heating and worse heating. Then just a super brief review on heat and human health, and then getting into some of the measurements of heat, the wet bulb temperature, the heat index, which the National Weather Service maintains, and describing how the National Weather Service does issue cautions based on this classification system. So there is a sort of a disaster component that the National Weather Service maintains. Then into urban heat, heat in cities, describing various physical aspects, reviewing. And now I've included, it's not in this version, a whole table of heat analysis at the city level. But here's a mention of the heat tracking that was done a couple of years ago by Matt and his group. And then we go into heat strategies, and the heat strategy component has also been bulked up quite a bit. So that's the overall structure of the paper. And then here at the end, there was one paper that came out, Wong et al. 2021, with just some wonderful illustrations. And so I just grabbed those and put them in an appendix, renderings of urban heat and cooling solutions. I think there are 4 of them all together. Yeah, so I just shoved those back there because they're for visual learners, right? All right, so that's just an overarching walkthrough.
Yeah, that's great. It is the intention to be like a one-stop shop with guidance, lit review, and then some action. I might suggest you dive deeper. You probably already have in like the heat mitigation sort of strategies. Maybe look at the building and sort of the planning scale, and then perhaps reference some examples that are currently happening, at least on the city scale, right? So that larger sort of systems approach. I think with the building, I think we can lean a lot to our current design strategies, passive design strategies for Hawaii. I think the first thing to not forget is that we have some inherently good methodology and thinking here. in our community. Um,
Okay. Yeah, if you have any resources.
Yeah, I will share those resources. But there was one other piece that I wanted to just more or less understand your thought behind it. So it's on page 5, it's under your recommendations. Cities should develop heat resilience building guidelines and codes. I have seen these fold into larger resiliency code overlays at the city level. But I haven't seen anything specific to heat. Have you seen any examples of that? Or are you thinking that a heat section will be part of a larger resiliency sort of overlay?
That was my thinking, just
Okay.
because heat, one reason perhaps historically we haven't seen it as a specific call out is because it hasn't been a big issue, but it's going to be. And it actually, it was a few years ago where we had broke over 300 heat records in one summer. I think that was 2019 or 2018. So.
Okay, well, I can share, there's an example that was done in New York City by Urban Green. It was part of their larger resiliency code overlay. And what they did was they looked at buildings of different scale and typology and talked about them holistically as a system. But I could see that being maybe, I don't know, an appendix to this paper, something that we reference, right? It obviously, we don't want to incorporate into this paper because it would stop the timing of getting this really valuable information out. But it could be just, I don't know, a working document or perhaps a presentation that just talks about how do we start thinking as a building system of getting these approaches of resiliency into our current code and ordinance system.
Okay, I'm going to need your help.
I know, I feel like I'm giving more work to myself, but that's what I'm here for. But yeah, I think this is definitely a good next step to explore.
Good. Okay.
So yeah, I think we just need to touch base maybe offline.
Yeah. So one-stop shop might be too ambitious a description
Okay.
of this thing, right? We don't
Okay.
want this to be encyclopedic.
I know. Yeah.
But we do want it to be meaningful and applicable. So
Yeah.
Thanks for those thoughts.
Welcome.
Rosie?
Hi, yes. First, thanks Chip for taking this on. I can definitely see that a lot of research, time and effort was put into this. So, I really appreciated it and being educated on this topic. I did want to comment on having the format of this guidance document be consistent with the format of other guidance documents that we've I guess, written as a commission, which is in general, the findings are a lot shorter. And so I thought the recommendations were good. I also want to apologize if you hear background noise because I have a puppy and she's kind of loud. So my main point, sorry, was I wanted to say the findings are really important. Can we distill it maybe to the top 5 that might be specific to the ones that are most applicable to Hawaii or the Pacific, and then maybe move the rest to the introduction, because I do see that you have, a good introduction. And so, for example, I thought the first point is great. Let me give you an example of something that I thought perhaps could be moved. I thought points 8 and 9 potentially were important, but something that could be moved farther back. So that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking of. I came up with some other potential ideas of points. So that's basically what I was thinking was identify, try, and maybe shorten those, just because I want to get to the good stuff, which is the recommendations faster.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. So I was going through and I have some notes on like, oh, this seems a little, so for example, I thought point 7 sounded similar to point 1. Is there a way that could be kind of combined? I did, let's see. I also thought that point five, I know these are big, really weighty topics, but I just was wondering if we could have maybe an overarching major topic and then people can then go and look for some of these details.
Yeah.
Either in what I think is called the introduction or perhaps even make an appendix. I don't know, but that's what I wanted to kind of say is like, I think we should condense them in and then point people to where they can get more information.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds good. I'll work with you specifically on getting those ideas.
Okay, and then as I was reading, there was just one specific thing where I was reading and I was like, I don't understand what this means. It was in point 6 when you talked about global warm season, heat-related deaths.
Yeah.
Is that trying to be cognizant of just the fact that there's, like an austral warm season? Did you just mean the warm seasons for those respective hemispheres?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I
Otherwise-
thought. I just wasn't sure.
Otherwise known as summer,
Yeah, that's why I was like, why didn't you put summer?
because that's the language that was in that paper.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
This,
All right.
Paper 18, Vichetto Cabrera, 2021, the burden of heat-related mortality attributable to recent human-induced climate change. That was an important paper. That one concluded that 37% of summertime heat-related deaths, 37% are attributable to climate change impacts. So they used warm season. I just said summer. So, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
All right. No, that was, I thought that was a really important point.
Yep.
I just, as I was reading it, I was like, in terms of thinking about how this also gets, is accessible to, we want our city departments and other leadership to read it. I just thought, just as far as readability, it was something that I had flagged. But other than that, I thought that it's very strong. Again, like I said, I want us to get to the recommendations, which I think are the parts that are most important.
Yeah, we could shove the findings into an appendix. I mean, absolutely. We could, the stuff that's getting in the way, we can put into an appendix. So that's not a problem.
Okay. Yeah, that's the only thing is I think to me, given our commission is advisory, so that means I would want us to like put, but I was stunned by many of the findings. So I think that too was, so again, that's what I'll work with you. Maybe we can just kind of condense it. That's all.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you were stunned. I've been getting stunned for decades. When you really climb into this stuff, it's just, whoa, I didn't know that. How come nobody's talking about that? And it's heat, sea level rise, melting ice, it just goes on and on and on. Every little sector in climate change is far worse than we're being led to believe by the media.
Yeah, so the last point that I wanted to make is in the equity paper, one thing that Vicky and I want to say, it's not really me, it's the wonderful people who interns who help us do the research, highlighted, we made little highlight boxes of examples that were great, and you did put them in. I'm just wondering if you want to call them out a little bit of like, just visually, right?
The new version,
cited examples.
Yeah, the new version, I've put in like over 10 highlight boxes now. So yeah,
okay.
That's ideas.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I was reading about Singapore, what Singapore is doing, and I thought that has applicability to what's going on here in Hawaii because similar climate, that kind of thing. So I thought I would like to see that kind of just visually easy for me to pull it out. So that's what I was thinking is if someone were to pick up this, what are the main things we want to convey? Like we want to convey the recommendations, and I mean, these are shocking, but also kind of provide examples of hope, places we can turn to for,
things to do, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, the newer version has this, you probably can't see it, but there's this table, some summary of city heat mitigation and adaptation efforts. So there is more granularity, but all your comments are great. And yes, I've got a lot of these call out boxes now, so we can highlight those somehow. Matt, Did you have a chance to take a look at it at all?
Not in detail, but appreciate the opportunity. Had some just similar structuring comments as Vice Chair Aligato. You know, there's like the climate change brief, which was more just about the findings, right, and putting it up front. But there's good examples from the guidance documents of really bringing the recommendations up front, recognizing the end users and the readers and assisting them in getting through it. So we appreciate that. And, you know, we'll definitely take an eye to it and provide written comments back to the commission. But you know, as I shared, this is extremely timely. Even at the federal level, they're thinking about this through things like transportation funding. I know it's not just surfaces, but buildings as well. We're still waiting for the guidance on how DOT will roll out one of the funding sources called the Healthy Streets Program, really looking at heat across communities and the networks that keep community connected. And just for your awareness, we've been participating for the past several months in this group called the Global Cool Cities Alliance, and they have a subgroup on Cool Roadways Partnership. So we've already been connecting with other similar colleagues in other municipalities across LA, Phoenix, Tucson, and others as well that are. This way we can learn from each other, not have to do the kinds of research that is already happening, and then better understand materials and applications.
Great, great. The Cool Cities Network, I think, has some publications. And I'm pretty sure we took a look at those, but it was a couple months ago. So if you run across any, great diagrams or summary tables of actions to be taken, again, to avoid being encyclopedic, but still to have at least some reference to steps to be taken, and especially from your position, Matt, that you would like to see in this guidance, please, this is the opportunity, as you know. So, any thoughts or comments from the public? Nancy.
Hi. Well, as a planner, for a while now, I've been accused of being a dreamer and utopian. And just from a young age, I realized that having a green city would be better for everyone. And so even though this is pretty scary stuff, I think I'm always looking for the silver lining in the cloud, so to speak, and that there's a win-win scenario here where we can make our cities more pleasant to be in, healthier, and more resilient. So I think this is great information, and I like your update too. So excited to see the final product.
Yeah, the newer version of the paper has a lot on green infrastructure. And water features. That's super important. And, contrary to my comments earlier that trees are not going to get us out of global warming, specifically, I meant they're not sufficient to pull CO2 out of the air and counteract our emission release. But trees are critical to adapting to the heat issue. And shade really needs to be fundamental to any design from here on out. We've said it before, but that super hot summer a couple of years ago, when you walk down the street, I and everybody else was navigating by tree canopy, right? You're going looking for where the shade is.
And the green walls, just the effect of the few green walls we have now in the city, it's really noticeable.
Yeah. And they've measured the temperature decrease associated with all these approaches. So it's very quantitative. There's good information. Any other comments? All right. Discussion on future place-based commission meetings. Rosie, do you want to tackle that one?
Yes, sure. Maybe I can call in Matt to also chime in on this. As you know, it's been a focus of this year to include new voices and bring those voices and those community-based expertises to the table so that we can be more aware of regionally specific issues having to do with climate change and climate impacts. So I was really inspired by what Matt was talking about it with their community game engagement on the North Shore and on the West Side, and perhaps that can be where we might have our first kind of like out in the community commission meeting. What do you think, Matt? Do you think so? My first question is, do we have to have it at some place like Kapolei? Could we have it at Malama Learning Center? What do you think would be the possibilities?
Yeah, and I'll ask Deputy Corporation Counsel Courtney to chime in to help us. Certainly there are new things that we want to continue to accommodate, but also make sure that we're living up to what the state legislature passed last year and the opportunities for both continued virtual meetings, hybrid meetings, in-person meetings. There's a lot of logistics that we would need to prep well in advance to make sure we're fulfilling all of the purposes and intents of Sunshine, but also the intention around the in-person engagement to actually host a meeting somewhere. We'd certainly want to make sure the agenda is structured and out well beyond the minimum 6 days in advance of a meeting to actually invite and encourage and ensure that people are participating in the meeting. So we would want to look at the schedule, Vice Chair, to see how it could work with the commission, how it could align with some purpose or intended discussion. And then I think we'll just have to, navigate the logistics of all of that. But the physical space of a meeting, as I understand, is open so long as it is accessible. And then making sure that we can provide all the options for accessibility. Free helps, public helps, city helps, but doesn't have to be the end all be all for a physical location for a meeting.
All right. Okay, any thoughts on that, Rosie?
I mean, I think what we're going to do is I think Matt and the office and I will just sit down and kind of sketch out potential organizations that we would bring. And then, because I think what we want to do is to have a number lined up so that they can come and provide organizations at different levels, everywhere from maybe neighborhood boards to, nonprofit organizations, community groups. And so we can kind of group them by geographic location. So I'm going to follow up with Matt. And then if we have any questions as far as additional accommodations, perhaps we can then reach out to Corporation Counsel so that we can maintain all the appropriate, rules that we need to.
And also just to ensure that we as an office have the capacity and the means to administratively support and facilitate the meeting, that advanced planning and thinking is what we'll really need to have the right tools, tech, numbers of people to ensure meeting success.
Yeah, and I'm seeing Henry Curtis in the chat put that the State Energy Office is meeting with communities, including Kahuku and the West Side, as well as neighbor islands. And while the neighbor islands are beyond our reach, it would be good for us to understand how other state agencies as well are kind of navigating into the community space.
Yeah, and just to comment on that, I mean, it's not a board or a commission that obligates any kind of sunshining. It's a direct community engagement, energy equity hui going out on these huaka'i across all of the efforts on climate change mitigation. So there are just more and different considerations for hosting a formal city climate change commission meeting.
Mahalo.
All right, we're up to item 9, public input for matters not on the agenda. Did any commission members have matters not on the agenda? Rosie?
Yes, so I did want to bring attention to the fact, and this was brought up to me actually by Anna Mines, who Matt referred earlier today, who's just left the office. But before she left, she sent me an email, and unfortunately, I couldn't add it to the agenda, the timing of it before our required 1 week. But she has been utilizing our social equity guidance document quite a bit and was recently, it was helpful in drafting CCSR's equity principles and commitments. One thing that she pointed out is that she had the opportunity to speak with Mona Higa at CCH's Equal Opportunity Office. And she noted that we need to update the piece on inclusion for persons with disabilities. So we need to include accessibility in our guidance document. And so just as Chip mentioned, he's going to be updating another guidance document. I'm going to be looking to updating the equity guidance document, and I hope to bring it to the table by the May meeting. If not, I will bring it to the June meeting.
Excellent. All right. Melanie, anything not on the agenda?
I don't have anything on the agenda, but I guess maybe just a general question. How do we support action at the council, like bills and ordinances that are being heard? Is this something that a commissioner just brings to the table prior to the next meeting, or?
Yeah, so if there's something that you would like the commission to consider, I believe we could try and put together a quick meeting. It would have to take would require a week of sunshine, but
Sure, right.
Working through Matt's office, we could rally and have a discussion about testimony. You'd probably want to write draft testimony leading into that meeting.
Okay.
But we can also, of course, individually submit testimony.
Okay, great. Good to know for future.
Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you.
Can I just add in, Melanie, that
Yeah.
OCCSR also does a great job at, I believe Haley is sending us weekly emails on the matters that might be of concern. And so that I usually look at those and I see if there's anything, and then that helps me to be like, oh, maybe we should submit testimony as a commission. And so that's what I use to keep me
Okay.
informed. I don't know if
Okay.
there's something else. And then of course, when Matt informs us of legislation that is moving through, that's also a time when perhaps we can consider whether or not it's appropriate. So for example, Matt did mention Bill 22. It is coming to, I believe you said April 19th. Is that correct, Matt? Is the next time? And so, yeah, Matt, you have a lot of information.
Matt, do you have a comment based on a comment that was made on the Facebook live stream?
So the questioner, Sheila, is referring to these community engagements that we're partnering with Malama Learning Center. The exciting thing about this is recognizing that people's time is valuable, and through a grant that Malama Learning Center was able to secure through the Bloomberg Philanthropies American Cities Climate Challenge, as administered by Capua Consulting, the grant accommodates compensating people for their time and participation. So the funding comes through that funding source as distributed by Malama Learning Center.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions that for issues not on the agenda from the public? All right, we're coming into the end here. Next meeting date, I don't have one on my planner. Do we not have a meeting date identified? Melanie or Rosie, do you know of one for May?
I don't see anything on my calendar.
Yeah,
Let me just
okay,
find
so
it out.
Matt, can your office do a polling of the commission members? Is that how we do it? And then find a day in May
Yes.
sometime. All right.
Should the poll hold these Fridays, this 9 to 11 time as the offerings?
Works for me.
That would
Like
work
this
for
time.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please don't do May 13th. That is SOAS commencement.
Noted.
Yeah, but it's not until the evening.
But I believe that Earth Sciences has an all-day event planned.
Oh, I better be present for that. Okay. Any announcements from anybody? Melanie, any announcements?
No announcements at this time.
Okay, Rosie?
Sure, yes. The PICASC, actually it's not PICASC, it's the Southeast Cask. They are having a series of seminars on tribal knowledge and climate change, and I can share the links to that in the chat. And so it's recorded seminars in case people aren't able to attend, and should be quite interesting.
Matt, any announcements?
Nothing additional. Thank you.
Okay, any announcements from the public? Alrighty,
I actually
Yeah.
have one thing. I just thought of it now when Rosie
ahead.
brought it up. So we are launching Architecture 2030 commitment education for the design profession. So we're having an Earth Day event, AIA is. So that's on the 22nd. So any designers, architects, professionals out there, I welcome you to join. It's hopefully going to be a series of additional training that we do, really on that charge of getting to that 2030 zero energy, zero carbon goal.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Rosie, you want to mention these things in the chat?
Yes, I just dropped the link, and then I'm also dropping the registration for the seminars right now.
Okay. Alrighty, going once, going twice. I'm going to drop the gavel. We are adjourned, everybody. Thanks very much. Everybody stay safe out there and enjoy the weekend.